Okay, let's dive right into this cinematic explainer. Today, we're not just looking at accounts. We're stepping directly into the shoes of the witnesses. Think of this as a short horror film unfolding right in your mind. We're going to really focus on the exact sounds they heard, the creeping chill of their environments, and that visceral, primal panic that completely takes over when reality just fractures. Imagine the absolute freezing grip of fear. You know, the kind of terror that literally paralyzes you in your own bed, where your brain screams, the only thing we could do was pull the blankets over our heads. Before we can truly grasp what put these people in such a helpless state, we've got to look at the exact environments that birthed these nightmares. Which brings us to part one, terrifying breaths in the dark, an apartment in Ecuador. So we're starting off in a really claustrophobic space, a small 4-unit apartment building, the kind of tight-knit place where an unknown presence feels intensely violating. A neighbor girl runs over seeking refuge after a violent argument with her father. But as she's sitting in the living room, pouring her heart out to the mother and sister, the air in the room literally drops in temperature. It gets icy. She tells them about a watcher next door. Not just a shadow, but a solid black shape made of pure darkness, completely faceless, standing perfectly still. It casts this unbelievably heavy, dark mood over the entire building. Fast forward a few nights. The twin brothers of the family are settling in, sharing a bed, lying back to back. One of them decides to pull a silly prank. He starts breathing really loudly, just to be annoying, right? The other brother, totally irritated, jabs him with his elbow to make him stop. But the humor just instantly evaporates. It's replaced by this creeping, sickening dread when they realize the heavy breathing didn't stop. The annoyed brother mutters, "Stop it, let me sleep." And then comes the immediate, terrified whisper back, "It's not me." That is it. That's the exact second absolute freezing paralysis takes over. The prank is done. The sheer reality of their vulnerability in that pitch-black bedroom just crashes down on them. And the breathing they're hearing, it isn't normal. It is slow, deep, right behind them. It sounds exactly as if someone or something is standing right next to the bed, physically, leaning down over them in the dark. You can almost feel that unnatural, cold air brushing against the back of their necks in the dead silence. So, was that faceless, solid shadow the neighbor girl saw now standing right there, looming over them in the pitch black? The boys basically hid under the covers in pure agony until their mother flipped on the lights, revealing an empty room. But man, that terror was incredibly real. Moving on to part two, the cutoff foggy road, a 3 a.m. drive. Okay, we're trading the claustrophobia of a bedroom for the isolating expanse of the open road. Picture this vividly. You are a young, exhausted cook. You've just finished a grueling shift, you hung out with coworkers till past 3 a.m., and now you're driving home. The weather is chilly, damp, and this thick fog is just rolling over the pavement. You just want your bed, and you're only 3 minutes away. But as you cross over an isolated bridge, peering through the freezing mist, your headlights catch a dark shape struggling in the distance. As he gets closer, this dark shape forms into a massive deer, basically dragging itself across the asphalt. And instantly, you can see something is horribly, horribly wrong with its anatomy. It has no lower half at all, just none. It is a completely clean cut, just the upper torso, frantically pulling itself across the freezing road. The graphic, physically impossible nature of the sight just permanently burns into the witness's retinas as he drives past, completely unable to stop. And here is where the mystery gets even darker. Now, this witness is a big guy, 6'3", 250 pounds, and he clearly noted this deer was a massive animal. Yet when he drives back to that exact bridge the very next morning to check it out, there's nothing. No carcass, no drag marks, not a single drop of blood on the pavement. I mean, how does half of a massive creature simply vanish into the fog overnight? All right, let's get into part three, the abandoned cabin in the snow, November 2023. This final account literally plays out like a short horror film, driven entirely by the overwhelming dread of absolute isolation. We've got a group of 17-year-old boys exploring right after a heavy snowstorm. The sky is low with these thick gray clouds. They stumble onto this untouched, trackless path, winding through tall, bare trees. And pay attention to the sensory details here, because they are crucial. There are no birds, no wind, no natural smells, just absolute dead silence and freezing still air surrounding an old weathered shed with fogged up windows. So, they slowly break the seal of this abandoned space. First, Julian and the narrator try the door, but it's frozen completely shut. Then, Dylan actually manages to pry open a high window. He crawls into the pitch-black darkness inside, followed by Logan, while the rest wait outside. The tension here is a serious slow burn, and right at that exact moment of maximum vulnerability, a shape peeks out at them from behind the shed. And the anatomy of this watcher, it is horrifyingly wrong. It's shaped somewhat like a human, sure, but it stands far too upright, too rigid, too aware. It has this pale skin, or maybe it's white fur, around its head, topped with pointed Doberman-style ears. But the absolute worst part, its massive, dark-rimmed, human-like eyes. Unlike any normal animal out in the wild, those eyes did not reflect the light. They were just dead, dark voids staring right back at the boys. Julian is the first one to see it. His brain just frantically tries to process this impossible nightmare into a shape he can understand. He literally stutters out, "Shit, a dog! A dog! A dog!" It is pure, desperate denial. He knows exactly what he's looking at, and he knows it absolutely shouldn't exist. Which brings us to Part 4. Man, that's no dog. The escape. The very moment that denial shatters, the psychological horror takes total control, and the scene just erupts into pure panic. Logan, who had just climbed inside that dark shed, jumps right back out the window, landing on his stomach in the snow with a heavy thud. He catches one glimpse of the entity and shouts the phrase that's going to haunt them forever. "Dude, that ain't no dog." That is the exact second their fight or flight response fully hijacks their bodies. It's absolute chaos. Josiah blindly sprints into the trees. Dylan, trapped inside, realizes the window is way too slow, turns around and literally kicks the frozen door off its hinges to escape. Meanwhile, the narrator and Julian are actually laughing. It's this hysterical, visceral defense mechanism to the sheer terror. But as they're running, Julian slips on a patch of ice and faceplants hard into the snow. He chuckles for a split second, but when he lifts his head and looks back at the shed, the laughter instantly dies, his face goes stone cold, he scrambles up and absolutely bolts. And finally, Part 5, Indelible Psychological Scars 1 year later. Surviving a moment of absolute terror like that, it leaves permanent, indelible marks on your psyche. About a year later, some of the boys actually returned to the shed. In 2023, it was a weathered ruin with a terrifying presence. But by 2024, it had been renovated, fresh paint, new wood panels. Yet, disturbingly, the boys note that the modern renovations somehow made the location feel even worse. The creepy energy was gone, sure, but it was replaced by something much colder, emptier, and somehow deeper. The trauma manifests violently across the whole friend group. The horror didn't just stay at the shed. Julian, he flat out refuses to ever talk about it. Dylan remains completely silent on the matter. Logan tries to mask his fear with nervous jokes, but you can see the terror is still right there in his eyes. And the narrator? He is permanently haunted. He literally can't close his eyes without seeing that impossibly pale face peeking out from the shed and hearing Logan's terrified voice echoing in his mind. These 3 encounters prove that real fear isn't just a cheap jump scare. It's a cold, suffocating blanket that alters how you perceive the world forever. So I'm going to leave you with this final, unsettling thought to linger on tonight. If that thing, standing far too upright with dead, lightless eyes, wasn't a dog, what exactly was watching them from the snow?